Alrighty then, I will begin. I am excited. This is a follow-up of something that started many years ago, as Susan has just mentioned to a few of us, that back in 2017, she began her book publications with her first written book. And now as we move into a whole new world of technology and audiobooks, there's so much more we have to offer. And I'm going to be introducing Susan and asking questions, as well as that of Pam Rossi, the narrator of these books. And both of those positions are so important. Susan is just an exquisite writer and author, dealing with books, touching on topics that are so very needed to be discussed right now. And with the gift that Pam possesses, we'll learn more about her. We can take this all to another whole world. As Susan knows, she'll be able to reach many more people who choose to listen than read their books and put it all out there. So as a author myself of 8 books, knowing that people are constantly saying, what about the audio? What about the audio? Susan is ahead of the game, far ahead of myself, and out there creating these audiobooks. And I'm so proud to be a part of making this happen. There will certainly be room later for questions and answers. If you have them, please put them in the chat. And at any point in time, they come up and they will be asked. We will be there to support you and make things happen. This is truly about launching the books, launching the audio books, and letting the world know about it. And all of us would love it if you spread the word. Any of you who may be involved in the world of domestic violence or any kind of assault, sexual assault, whatever the case may be, spread the word. These books are here. People need to know about them, and they need the healing that Susan can provide in her own unique way and really support those who have suffered. As you can see, she has a series of books and they are ready to make a difference in the world. So let's begin. I am ready to go. Susan, are you ready to be questioned?
So I am ready to be interrogated by you, Dorothy. I've been waiting for this. I've got, as an attorney, I've got all my arguments all lined up, all of my, right? Go ahead.
As if I'm about to do that to you.
I know, sweetie.
Susan is an attorney and award-winning author, and rightfully so, and workshop leader whose new audiobooks of her 2 novels, Awaken and Emerge, are launching today. She was inspired to write these novels by the true events of the death of her 19-year-old niece, Maggie, killed by an ex-boyfriend. So much of what happens in domestic violence today is where people are killed, as we know, in domestic violence by people they know. This is today is the 22nd anniversary of Maggie's death in 1999. And since then, Susan has helped hundreds of women through her My Avenging Angel workshops that take the journey from victim to survivor to thriver. We don't want anybody to go through this journey surviving. We are not meant to survive. We are meant to live and live fully in the state of survival. And the gift of Susan is taking people through those stages, bringing you from survivor all the way up into thriving and letting you know that your past experiences are a part of who you are. You are so much more than the experiences you've been through. All right, so Susan, we just mentioned today, why today? The book launch. What more would you like to add to that?
Well, as many people on this call or this webinar may know, my niece was murdered by her ex-boyfriend on a college campus in Michigan in 1999. That was actually October 17th. She was killed that night, and she was at midnight, 11 o'clock, midnight, and the next day is when she was declared dead. So October 17th and 18th are very sacred for me. And so every year I've tried, and Sharon and many people who've been hanging with me for years know that this is the day that I always have something positive, something good, and something that has her energy in it, which is a very vibrant, young, thriving young woman who didn't have a chance to move on. So this is why I do this, and this is why I invite all of you every year this day. So you'll notice when I talk about my book signing events, they're always on the 17th or the 18th.
So what a legacy she has left for the world, and your gift to her, bringing her message without even knowing it, bringing her message to the world and helping transform the planet because of her own goodness. In addition to your nonfiction books, you chose to write these novels. Why?
Well, I wanted to write something about Maggie. I knew that a memoir would be much too difficult, that it's too emotional. There were too many things I didn't know. But the one thing that I did want to learn that I couldn't find out from the police report or anybody else who was in the room that night when Maggie was killed, just she and the man who murdered her, is what happened in that room. And I was sort of obsessed about that for a while. Like maybe if I knew that, I could convince myself there was nothing I could have done for Maggie that night. So I decided, which was really crazy, to sit down and write the murder scene. And so I did. It was kind of interesting, I guess would be a weird word to use, because suddenly I could figure out the dynamics of what was going on, the conversation, knowing my niece's personality, knowing that he was a manipulative person that got her there and wanted her, and she didn't know he had a gun. And he had never physically assaulted her before that moment. So part of me was like, oh my God, I figured out what happened in that room and how Maggie couldn't get out. And the other part of me is like, oh God, I wrote this scene. It was so horrific. But then I realized what I wanted to do was, okay, so, I want to show in fiction why what were the warning signs that a person like Maggie missed? What were the dynamics going on in the relationship? But most of all, I wanted to show how people could move on from the situation. All the people, her family, her friends, and I changed all the names and all the situations, but really that was my goal, was to put that in a story. So sometimes we can see things in a story we can't see in our own life, and that's what I wanted to do.
And it's perfect, because those of us who unfortunately have worked with others who have been through this before know that there were always warning signs,
Right.
but they were so easy to be missed.
Right.
They were so easy to be missed. When you believe you're madly in love with somebody, or you believe everything is so wonderful, it's so easy not to see the obvious for others.
Right.
What was the hardest part for you in writing this book itself?
Well, definitely the murder scene. Although, like I said, some part of it was liberating. The other part was just going back to the emotional content of it, how it impacted me, how I found out the phone call in the middle of the night from my sister, how I just couldn't believe it was happening. And then the aftermath of trying to imagine how we were all going to get through this in my family. And then what was I going to do with it? So I wanted to show that in a fictional story. But it was hard, because sometimes I think I haven't done enough. Sometimes I think there are pieces that will never be okay. And sometimes I think that this is exactly what I want to do. And I've always wanted to write a novel. So I just didn't want it to be about this topic in this particular, but so that part of me really was excited. I also didn't know how to write a novel. So that was another thing that I had to get through. Just a minor problem.
Detail, small.
Yeah, right.
For so many people who are living through this, there is that question of, what can I do? What could I have done? What should I have done? Why didn't I know? Why didn't I see? And the realization is they couldn't have.
Right.
But always those questions that come, and they're constant. And the gift for you, I mean, you're a perfect example of that. And so for you, unfortunately, because you're so gifted, you have the ability to write these books, to put it out there, and to use the material, do something with your own questioning, because that is a natural part of those who are left behind. Is what if, what I possibly, and there you are creating something. So for you, in doing so, how did the stories of both Awaken and Merge flow together? How have you created that in this series that you're doing?
Well, I wrote Awaken. I actually had been writing a bunch of scenes before Maggie's death. And so I incorporated a lot of that material in the main character, Lisette, who's the stripper, who I am not a stripper. I never want to be one, but I'm writing about a stripper. It was a very interesting character then to incorporate into the story that was loosely based on Maggie's story. The idea that I began to pull this together is that when I got the first book together, it was set in 1999. I then thought, well, what's this thing about writing a sequel? People write sequels. How do they do that? So I thought, well, maybe we should go 10 years further. I want to know what's going on. I know what's happening, what I was able to achieve in my own reality in 10 years after Maggie's death. What would be happening with these characters? So I got kind of interested in that. a number of years ago, people in Connecticut remember that we had a major snowstorm around Halloween, and my power was up for 10 days. I had no lights, no internet, no TV. So I started reading Diane Gabaldon's book series on the Outlander. She's the queen of sequels. And I thought, okay, now I know how she did this. You know, she has characters and this is the next thing. So I began to figure out what I wanted to do next. What would be that next 10 years? And one of the best tools that a fiction writer has is that gift of saying, what if? So what if this character does so-and-so? And so that's what I started doing.
Now, we have a small difference of opinion on this one. The greatest gift is just the what if. But to me, the greater gift is in 10 years, you grew. In 10 years, you have another lifetime of experience. In those 10 years, you have the ability, as hopefully all of us who grow do, to look at something from another perspective with an addition to it, as you did. And now that you've done that with this book, now we're talking about your third book. You know, so talk about a series. You and Outlander can, you can supersede whatever she has done.
Well,
So
I think she's on 10 or 15, so I don't think I'll get there.
only times. So tell us, when is the third book coming out?
So it's coming out October of 2022. It's a little bit late because of COVID and everything, but it's going to be set in 2019. But I'm kind of thinking, and I'll talk about this a little later in the program, I'm thinking about maybe putting these characters in the COVID time and see what happens to them there. So I don't know. I'm playing with that. So, but definitely it'll be out next year, probably on October 17th or 18th. That's for sure.
I say go for it. You've got such an amazing ability to bring present day reality into your books and to make this that much more real.
Thank you.
That much more real, which causes people to be that much more invested in following up. What happens next? What happens next?
Right.
And it's great to know the experiences we go through. How does somebody else go through them? And that's what you're talking about. You're taking them through the same timeline they're living, but giving it another perspective that they can take a moment out of their own life and follow somebody else's life through your novels. It's and a wonderful, wonderful, exciting adventure. And now we're back to that question, which to me, and I know because it's always run through my mind in the past number of years, why audiobooks and why now? What possessed you to do this? We know you're reaching a far greater audience. We know there are so many that want to listen to these in the car or while they're doing things around the house. Why for you did you choose to go here?
Well, my cousin Pam suggested it, so I'm going to put it on her. She's going to ask her that question. But it was, I've been thinking about it for a while. I started my own Audible membership, and I started listening to audiobooks, and I was fascinated by them. And as you know, how the voices work and how the story works. And some people are much more auditory. I'm much more of a visual learner, but other people learn more by listening. So that was interesting. I also did a little research, and I found out that the market size for audiobooks in 2020, the beginning of the COVID time, was $3.3 billion. That's a really big market share for books in general, let alone audiobooks. And it's expected to project to go to, in 2027, to $15 billion. So it really is the place. And I think particularly, even before COVID, but particularly in COVID, a lot of people listen to podcasts. So they got used to listening to people and listening to stories. So I thought, why not? And particularly for fiction, it seems to be, although Pam and I have talked about doing some of the nonfiction books, they're a little bit harder because they're more interactive and graphic and stuff. But novels, yeah, to tell the story would be great. Excellent.
I think it's fantastic. But for you as an author, how is it different for you as you see, because I'm somebody who tends to hold a book. I don't do Kindle. I like to hold it in my hand. How for you as an author, is there a difference between reading your book and then hearing your book? It's two completely different ways, just as you said. But as the author, what's your experience?
Well, my experience at first is my inner critic jumped in really fast. And it's like, this sounds really stupid. Oh, these sentences don't make any sense. And then eventually, and Pam did some really good narrative on a couple of the scenes. I found some of the scenes were actually more vivid in the listening than they were on the page. And that was really interesting to me because I have a couple of scenes, and Pam knows, that are kind of emotional and have a little action to them. And like, oh yeah, I'm really into this. And the other thing that was really interesting, I wrote Awaken many years ago, published it in 2016. I forgot the end of the story. So I'm listening to it and going, I wonder what happens next, And so I'm literally like turning the virtual pages like anybody else, going, I know the very ending, but what's going to happen to that character? So you really do get captured by it. And that's what I think the power of audiobooks are.
That is, you are so wonderfully authentic. It is so fantastic. So yeah, as you're doing this, you're going to be writing a third. You best know how the second one went, so you can start the third.
I know. I got it. So I did listen to what I had to do, which was another piece that was interesting to me. I had listened to the whole thing that Pam did and pick up any what she calls pickups. Any corrections, mispronunciations, whatever. So I literally listened to it word for word, and that was interesting because when you read, you sometimes skips words.
Right.
You sort of just read and I'm like, oh, this word, that's interesting. Is that word right?
But as an author, when you're reading, you're also editing. How many times do we edit our books? We write a book and we edit it and edit it. Others edit it, then we edit the editor, and then it becomes crazy. But when you're just listening, you have the gift of just listening. You can't change anything, so you just absorb it.
Well, then I can write Pam a little note. Can you change this word? And I tried not to change every word, but and then my inner critic quieted down after a while, and then I sort of got into it. But it's unnerving to listen to your work. It sounds like it doesn't sound like the other people who are really good. Right. You have to get an ear for it.
And we all know we are our own worst critic.
Yes, absolutely.
As our own worst critic, we never truly get to see it objectively. We find out so much that inner perfectionist pops up. Why don't you allow folks here to hear the audio example of Awaken, just so they can form their own opinion, because I have a feeling it's going to be nowhere near as good.
Right. So this is on the audiobooks on Audible and iTunes and Amazon. There's a little sample. So this is the sample that's up and that Pam chose. And this is actually the prologue of the first book of Awaken. This is the main character, one of the main characters, Lisette. And in the prologue is always something that happens before the action of the story begins. So this is actually Lisette, who was 19 when the story begins. This is actually Lisette at 16. And it's a description, a scene that describes a childhood trauma she had that sort of sets her up for why she's so vulnerable at the start of the story of the novel. So I'm going to share my screen here and go to the piece. Here it is. It's going to take a minute to get there. All right. And this is the iTunes preview.
Living well is the best revenge. George Herbert. What we have once enjoyed, we can never lose. All that we love deeply becomes a part of us. Helen Keller. Your vision will become clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. Carl Jung. Prologue, April 5, 1996. The Escape. She saw the flashing lights of the police car in the rear-view mirror of her father's pickup truck when she was about half an hour out of town. She had gone to the payphone down the street from the bar, where she called in a report of the fire without giving her name. Her plan was to drive the truck as far as she could on the tank of gas she had filled it with earlier that day, and then just leave it where it stopped. She had been crying ever since she had left her father's bar. There, less than an hour ago, she had been so calm and cool as she lit the match and watched the place go up in flames. Now she could feel the panic setting in. What had she done? Did she really think she'd get away with it? What was going to happen to her? There was no going back now. The cops would pull her over, and soon she would be under arrest for killing Ralph. He deserved it, she thought. He was a mean, miserable son of a bitch and no father to her. She had killed him, and she didn't even feel sorry. In fact, she was glad, even relieved, that he was out of her life forever. She hated him that much. Then she thought of her mother. How could her mother have ever loved a man like him? How could she have left her with him? Her mother never spoke much about Ralph when she was alive, and certainly not when she was dying of the cancer that slowly ate away her body. She must have thought that when she died, Ralph would change, that he would love and take care of their daughter. But didn't she know that he always was and always would be a liar and a bastard? He lied about everything, and he didn't care who he hurt, not even her, his own daughter. It was all Ralph's fault that she was stuck in this nightmare. If only he had been the kind of father who had cared and watched out for her, this wouldn't be happening to her now. If only, if only, if only. "Step out of the truck, young lady," the tall police officer said as he came up to the driver's side and flashed a light in her eyes. "You're not going anywhere tonight." She didn't recognize this cop as anyone who had ever come into Ralph's bar, and she was so exhausted she decided not to argue with him. Instead, she dragged her weary body out of the truck and stood on the side of the road. A second cop, younger than the first and with short cropped blonde hair, searched the truck from the passenger side. The other officer spoke to her again. "You don't have a license, do you?" "I've got a learner's permit. It's in my purse." She leaned against the truck and closed her eyes. "Bob, can you get the purse?" He signaled with the light to his partner. Then he turned back to her. "Do you have any other identification?" "Just my library card, but it's expired." He asked gruffly, "Are you Lisa Rosniak?" She stared at him blankly, but then remembered that he wouldn't have any way of knowing about the transformation she was planning. After tonight, she would use another name instead of Lisa. A dorky name she always hated. She wanted a name that was more... what? Grown up and sexy sounding, not like a little kid. Before she could respond, the cop added impatiently, "Is your father Ralph Rosniak?" "Yes," she said in almost a whisper. "Is that an affirmative to both of my questions?" She looked puzzled, like she didn't understand what he was asking her. "Look," he said slowly and loudly, as if she was hard of hearing, "you're Lisa, and your father's Ralph, right?" "Yeah, right." "How old are you, and what are you doing out here all by yourself?" "I just turned 16 today, and I'm..." She paused for a moment. "I'm going to my aunt's house. She lives over in Clark's Bay." "Does she know that you're driving in the middle of the night without..."
Okay, I think we're back.
We now can introduce this voice behind the scenes, So now that we know that Pam is Susan's cousin, that's one qualification, but there's so much more to who she is and what she's done. What a wonderful gift that is. But in addition to that, Pam's been a radio DJ for over 30 years, mostly in Detroit, where she was born and raised. Pam honed her skills at a number of broadcast outlets as an on-air personality, music director, producer, production and news traffic reporter, just to broaden her entire experience across the whole world of media. She's got it covered. She's also hosted internet radio shows where she has conversations with local, national, and international music guests. When not in the radio music mode, Pam has her own voiceover business. Obviously, she's great at it, specializing in explainer videos, e-learning, corporate narrations, commercials, telephony, audiobooks, and more. Pam is also the author of Over Easy Conversations with Pam Rossi. This is quite a family, isn't it? They all just get out there and start writing. This was published in 2016. It includes her interviews with major musical talents like Peter Yarrow and Dan Fogelberg. Wow, she's also appeared in movies as a background actor, most notably in Up in the Air with George Clooney. Now that's an adventure. So you've really had a fantastic experience, Pam. I'm so excited. I love it when people truly live this life and don't survive it. You've gone to that level. Your sister wants to take so many others too. It's great to meet you. It truly is. All right. So if you don't mind, I've got some questions for you as well. Let the audience know
Absolutely.
who you are. Okay. Are these your first audiobooks that you've narrated?
No, to date, I've done over 40 books,
Oh my.
mostly nonfiction. So it was a real treat to do the fiction ones of Susan's books, but yeah, about 40 books at this point.
Wow. What kind of projects were they?
I did a lot. I love doing nonfiction, which means, the self-helps or the training, like how to train your puppy in 2 weeks, or learning Reiki, or I did a couple history books. The one called Riding the Rails, about the hobos in the Great Depression. Errol, I keep forgetting how to pronounce his name. Errol Lynn Hughes, I think it is. So he decided to put his book on audio, so I did that. So that was like a memoir history book. Also did a great one about baseball, and it was called Heroes. And it was talking about Ty Cobb and Christy Mathewson, and it was basically how the journalists made heroes out of the baseball stars, and that's where it all started. So did those. So yeah, a big variety of
I
different
was going to
types.
say, yeah, it's really eclectic. You do a broad spectrum, so clearly, how do they find you? Or do you find them? How does it happen? Because it's so varied for you.
I'm on ACX, which is Audio Creative Exchange, and ACX is owned by Audible, which is owned by Amazon. And so when all this audiobook stuff started up, as Susan had mentioned, because it is the fastest growing format in the publishing world, because more and more people are now listening to audiobooks as opposed to reading. Although many times they'll find that people that listen to the book will buy the book as well. They like both versions in their hands.
Yeah.
So, but that's when I got into it, is like, because I was doing voiceovers, and I thought, okay, I need to get into this because it's really just blowing up. And that's when I approached Susan, because I wanted to get things started. And so I'm on ACX, and that's how I do most of the books that I do.
Fantastic. I would imagine that there is a different process for the training books, for how to teach your dog to do whatever, or in all these other corporate books. What about a fictional book? What's the process for you in writing a book of fiction?
Well, fiction, because there's characters and different scenes, it's usually a process, the story. So basically, if you do fiction, you have to read the book first.
Mhm.
And then, so I will literally set up a spreadsheet with characters, where they first pop into the book, what kind of scene they're in. And if there's anything like, like there's an accent, or he's from Brooklyn or something, I need to note those things. So when those characters come up again, I remember what they're supposed to be doing. So there's a lot of prep work in it. And then, of course, if there's words that I don't know how to pronounce, I have to, go find out what those words are and how they say them. So that's a little different. That's the main difference between fiction and nonfiction, is prepping beforehand.
Wow, that's amazing too. And I would imagine where they come from. I've seen so many movies. I happen to come from South Boston, and I hear so many folks do movies, and they try to pretend they're from Boston. And it's so clear they don't have a clue how to speak with the Bostonian. And so there's got to be that whole piece in there, that just it's a different world. You're doing so much, and in fiction that matters. When you're doing a corporate training, it's irrelevant because it's one component. There's so much to that work. Isn't it amazing how behind the scenes there's so many things people don't recognize or understand, and what a gift you've got. For you, what is the best part of writing and the hardest part of writing fiction, or of reading fiction?
Reading fiction. Well, the hardest part is the dialogue. If there's many characters in one scene with a dialogue, that's the hardest part. I mean, with Susan's books as well, when sometimes I'll be reading a line and then you realize, because it'll say, she said, or, so-and-so said, or whatever. And it was like, oh, that was the wrong character I just said, go back and do it again. So keeping that all straight is the hardest part about fiction.
Well, if that's really hard, then how long can you do it without getting exhausted when you're working so hard to read as if it's natural while you're also trying to keep with all the players in a row? How long can you do that without saying I need a break?
Yeah, that's a good question. Lots of water, keep hydrated. That's the main thing. But it's funny because when you buy a book, it's by per finished hour. So a book ends up being 10 hours, for example. The
Right.
rule of thumb is for 1 hour of a finished recording, and this doesn't include reading the book beforehand,
Right.
that 1 hour of recording will generally take 3 to 4 hours to do, because you have to edit, go back, fix it, edit it and all that kind of stuff. And you cannot, most people can't record more than 3 to 4 hours a day. It's just too much on your voice, especially if you have a lot of different character voices and not a straight read. So that's pretty much how you have to get a book done, how you get a book done.
So it's a long, slow process. It reminds me that, as a keynote speaker, when I'm out there speaking, they'll say, but you just spoke for an hour. Why does it cost so much money? Because you didn't just speak for an hour. You took days, if not weeks, to write that talk, to go over that talk 20 times so that by the time you present the talk, it's
Yes.
flowed naturally and spontaneously, when in fact, there was a whole lot of work that goes into doing that. So it makes perfect sense to me that, yeah, it's 1 hour, but not really. No. There's so much more that goes into all of those kinds of things. What about all the voices? How do you practice all? Because as you're saying, it's exhausting, but you've got high tones, low tones. You're all over. How are you doing that?
Well, basically what I did with Susan's books is, in the business, it's called straight read, which is more and more books are going this direction, which means I don't have like completely opposite type of character voices. So my voice, my normal voice, is the narrating part. And
Okay.
then women's voices, I pitch up a little bit. Men's voices, I pitch down a little bit. And then each of the characters, for example, Sophie, she was higher pitched, but I sped her up. She talked faster. I don't know if that's what Susan envisioned, but that's what I envisioned. And Sophie became like she's the one that always wants to get things done and, blah, blah, blah. So she spoke faster. And then there was like Radiance. If you don't know the book yet, Radiance is an older character. So I put a little rasp in my voice for the older characters. So there was just little nuances to try to differentiate who they were. And that's the straight read.
But those nuances create a huge difference when you're listening.
I
Again,
hope so.
you make it sound so easy, but those make a big difference. When you're good at something, you can make the most complicated things seem so easy. So congratulations to all of your experience. It makes it that much easier for you to do it. And so with keeping all of the characters straight, you initially said you write down who they are and what they are doing and so forth. Is that how you, like this graph you have in the wall in front of you, where you can keep all of that going?
It's just a little spreadsheet I have on my computer that, if I'll print out if I need to, if there's a lot of characters. And that's how I keep it straight. That's the only way to keep it straight.
In this particular fiction book, there's a lot of difficulty. There's a lot of painful parts. How do you do that in keeping it? Because I know as a keynote speaker, there are times when I have to fight back tears on occasion and take a deep breath and go forward. But I'm only doing it for a short period of time. You're doing it for hours. How do you do that?
Well, the bottom line is it's not about me, it's about telling the story. So I have to look at it that way. It's my job to relay the story to the listener. And if I keep that in mind, and that's how I go into a book, it's not about me and how I sound and what I'm doing. It's about me getting the author's story across so that people want to listen.
Wow. Clearly there's so much. How many projects do you generally have going on at the same time? How do you try to do that to support you so you're not overwhelmed?
Well, the books, I don't like to do more than 2 books at a time. Nonfiction, it's a little different because that's just straight, reading. even though there's some storytelling in that as well. And then, but then I do the other voiceover stuff so that, I could have 5 projects going at once, but the books, I try not to do more than 2 at a time.
Smart move. Part of that is so perfect, the self-care.
Yeah.
Self-care is going to keep you far better at what you do. I speak often about never giving from exhaustion. It's never giving from running from project to project, because boy, that doesn't serve us, especially as a woman whose voice is out there. You want to be so fresh. I'm thoroughly impressed. We've heard from one book.
I think you have a customer here, Pam. I'm just thinking,
Could you give us an intro to the second book, To Emerge? Let us know about that.
Yes, I believe the clip that you're going to play is Lizette. In Susan's book, she did it in like 10 years after, and then I believe the next one's going to be another 10 years. So this is Lizette going back to the campus, after for the 10th anniversary. I believe this is the clip. So it's the beginning in chapter 1, Lizette going to campus, back to the college.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
Describes how she was looking for and found reliable love, given without conditions or offered without anticipation of getting something in return. It is the kind of love we can get from others, and we can also give ourselves, because no matter what mistakes we've made, we are still worthy and deserving of such love. May you be inspired by Lizette's journey to find such love and use it to fuel your journey to manifest the life of your dreams. Ever since I was a little girl, I
think that's the introduction. So, because I recognize what I wrote. Let me see if I can figure out what happened to that scene. Let me go to another source here that might be easier to get to. I want to hear that scene. Let's see. I now am realizing that the sample seems to be different on iTunes than it is on Audible. So let me pull up Audible here.
Yeah, I noticed, because I noticed on the first one you played,
Yeah,
you didn't play the one that was on Audible.
yeah, and that was shorter. So I actually,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
so let me go back and see if I can get this to share screen and get us to the right place. There it is. Still the Apple one. Here it is. All right, here we go.
Lizette wasn't thrilled about coming back to this place. After all, it was the college on the hill where 10 years ago, a crazy guy named Ari, a man with a gun, killed Lacey and then killed himself. But she was there on a Wednesday, a few days before the 10th anniversary of that horrible day, October 17, 1999. Besides not wanting to be reminded of all the trauma and drama of that time in her life, she never felt comfortable on a college campus. True, it was here that she found Sophie, Lacey's college roommate and best friend, who believed Lizette when she told her that Lacey's spirit had come into her body and she needed her help. It was a wild ride, but at least Lacey was at peace now. But Lizette's biggest fear of being on the campus again was more about how little schooling she had and how she couldn't read so good. Then, too, she had been a stripper dancing under the stage name of Attila the Honey the night Lacey died and when she first met Sophie at Lacey's funeral days later. Lizette felt stupid even being around college kids and couldn't understand why Sophie wanted her to come back and help her celebrate the 10th anniversary of Lacey's murder. To Lizette, it was more like something you'd want to forget or try to remember without feeling sad, but somehow Sophie saw it as a celebration. She was putting together a 10th anniversary gala. That's what she called it, and she wanted Lizette to help her. As crazy as it sounded, Lizette couldn't say no. When Sophie told her of her plan to gather all those who had helped her become so successful in her work, and her work was amazing, so she could thank them personally, Lizette wasn't sure that she was one of the people to thank. She hadn't done that much. Sophie was the one who was so smart, so clever, and so brave. She knew how to get things done. Still, Lizette was curious about what she had accomplished and how everyone and everything was. She had heard so much about it from Sophie on the phone and in the letters she wrote her. She had to see it with her own eyes. But riding up to the school in a taxi that afternoon wasn't exactly the best way to take it all in, Lizette realized later. She could see that the buildings on the campus looked the same, but the students, they looked so much younger than she remembered. Of course, she was 10 years older now, almost 30, and not getting any younger. For someone in her line of work, staying and looking young was everything. As the taxi drove through the campus and headed toward the large, open green space where the student center was located, Lizette wondered if Sophie or anyone else on the campus would actually recognize her now. In the last 10 years, she had gone through quite a transformation from Attila the Honey, the stripper, to a successful businesswoman. Only Todd, her business manager and sometime boyfriend, knew how hard that change had been for her. But it wasn't the biggest change she had ever made in her life. True, in the last 10 years, she had lent her stage name, Attila the Honey, to a nationwide chain of strip joints, which Todd liked to call upscale male entertainment venues. The business logo featured that pouty pose of her dressed up in her skimpy, white, furry outfit she had worn for years on the stage, her Attila the Honey getup. Ha! She thought.
Okay.
Something. I must say my bias as an executive leadership coach for visionary women. I love the idea that she's become an entrepreneur. You go, girl. We need more women in business and succeeding. And to transition from stripper to businesswoman, you go. I'm not having any opinion on her business, but I'm really glad she's got one and it's working for her. Now we have Kim Welsh wrote in the chat, as an avid audio book person, this is super interesting. I am so glad we are providing that much interest. Behind the scenes look. People buy things and now they're getting the behind the scenes look at all of it. At this point, we've asked before, if you have any questions, put it in chat. And Pam, Susan will be
or the Q&A. So actually, Kim is my web designer, and I forgot that Kim is a big audiobook. So if you go to thriverzone.com, which is my website, you can see Kim's work, and Kim's out in Oregon. So it was fascinating to hear what Pam had to say while we're waiting for any more questions, because one of the things that was fascinating to me is how you did the different voices. And I love the older women voices. Those are my favorite, Radiance. And you also did Abigail really well. So I'm like, yes, that's exactly how, because what's interesting to me as a writer is how I do visualize these characters in my head. Sometimes I've actually looked for pictures of them. So when I get really stuck, what would they look like? But I try not to do too much of that because it needs to stay in my imagination. But then when I now add a voice to it, it's really interesting. It's very, very interesting how that it's like, it's not quite a movie because you're not, one of the things as a writer that I've done it in writing groups and writing conferences is sit around and cast the characters in our novels by the celebrities of the day. Like George Clooney should be that main character. I know he should be, and how about, let's see, I don't know, who could be my the best woman character? I don't know. And so we would go through that process, but really trying to then, like I said, when I was talking to Dorothy a minute ago, was really trying to get the characters and the scenes come up much more vivid. And so it was almost like I was actually reading a different book. Or a different experience. So That was
Hopefully
really
good.
cool. Yeah, no, absolutely. But the other thing is they're kind of two separate things in some ways. And I agree with Dorothy that sometimes I, like when I read Michelle Obama's memoir on tape, on audiobook, wonderful, wonderful reading. But I wanted to see the book. I wanted to see the pictures inside, the pictures in the memoir book. So, and I sometimes do that too. I got to see the page, the chapters and stuff, but it's really cool. Any other questions out there? Guys are being shy. I just wanted to say that there are a number of people on here who are related to Pam and I. So I wonder if any of you were not shocked, but are surprised by Pam in the way she sort of developed this, how her voice is different than we knew as kids. When Pam's one of my younger cousins. So does anybody have a comment about that? Lisa or Michael or who else? My cousins or my aunts and uncles?
Because if there aren't any questions or comments, we can go right in.
Okay, go ahead.
You discussing your next book.
Mhm.
Because my goodness, now that we've seen this, and my first thought is, okay, she's back to college. Now what? So what's going to happen that many years later as you write?
Oh, Pam, there's a really good story there. We're not going to tell them, though. There's actually a few people on this call that are my readers, so they do know the answer to that question. Terry's one of my readers. I'm trying to see who else is on here. Yes, so that's a good question, Dorothy, but you're not going to get it out of me. Sorry. The answer, no.
Let's move on then. There doesn't seem to be any questions. So do tell us, what about Thrive?
Okay, so my Aunt Celie, Pam's mom, she has been one of my most avid readers, and she's been really great about it because she calls me up sometimes after she reads them while she's reading them, and that's so interesting what happened with this character, and what do you think is going to happen next to this character? And we have these really deep conversations about people that don't exist. I mean, it's really kind of fun, and we're treating these characters like, they're like down the street neighbors, and gee, I wonder what's happening to them next. And that's what I like as a novel writer, to be able to create in someone's imagination, and also to begin to really get them to embrace the story. So what I thought we'd talk a little bit about, and I'm going to get a little bit more interactive here. Oh, Lisa just put up, have seen Pam in action since the Thespian Club in high school, and her theatrical performances, always, no surprises here, always impressed her with her clear and concise narration. That's the other thing that I think is so interesting, Pam, is how clear you are and concise. I tend to slur my words, so I really have to think about it when I talk clearly and distinctly. How did you do that? How do you do that?
Well, I think part of it, well, as Lisa said, my one sister, being a thespian, you have to be clear what you're saying. But also radio, I've been in radio. My first job was back in 1980, and radio in the earlier days, it's different now, but the earlier days, it was all about being, very clear and concise and pronunciation, and the announcer type voice. And that's where I picked it up, I think, is trying to do the radio DJ thing.
Right. And there are a couple of people, including my friend Jennifer, who are big fans of your radio show. So you got other fans for music radio.
Right. And I was trying to type to Jennifer on the chat. For some reason, my chat wouldn't answer her. So I apologize, Jennifer. So yes, thank you. I appreciate that. 17 years on WCSX here in Detroit. And then I moved over to WOMC for 2.5, and dear COVID ended that, but hopefully I'll be back on the air soon.
Right. And my sister Elaine had a good question. Pam, do you go into a studio or have a setup at home to record?
It's all at home, which is why, I can take breaks and go back into the booth and, record some more. I've recorded late at night, so whenever, the voice is ready to go, I just start talking. So yeah, I have my own booth here at home.
Oh, great. Hi, Elaine. And I think my brother Frank and Kathy are also, brother and sister-in-law are also on. All right, so let's do this. I'm going to talk a bit about, and you can keep putting questions in the chat if you want to do that, or the Q&A. And Cindy, our erstwhile wonderful person behind the camera here, behind the scene, will keep track of that. We'll come back to it. So I wanted to talk a little about the next book. One of the things that I find intriguing with people who are intrigued by authors is, so like, how do you do that? And so one of the things I've learned is I really can't explain it. There are scenes like the murder scene that I talked about that I kind of planned, but I really sort of let it go, and just I learned to let it go, let the scene go. May not be in a really good place, but but I can certainly take it there. So let me share my screen here. I'm trying to get back to sharing. I don't know why it won't let me do that. Here it is. So here's the third book. This is called, it's going to be called Thrive. So it's Awaken, Emerge, and Thrive. And I've called it the Best Revenge series. One of the things, if you watch the video about my niece, Maggie, on my website, thriverzone.com, I talk about how when Maggie was killed, because he killed himself, that we didn't have the usual revenge to prosecute him and make sure that he hasn't hurt anybody else. So I had to sort of dig into what's my revenge. So I got the quote, living well is the best revenge. And that's really what I also teach in my workshops, my Avenging Angel workshops. That's where that comes from. But also I decided for a trilogy of books. And when I met Sharon, my book marketer, who's going to be on in a little bit, that was the question she asked me, like, so, you know, so what would you name your series of novels? And I'm like, oh, the Best Revenge series. So it's the third book. So here's the three books. I published Awaken in print in 2017, Emerge in print in 2019, and then this will be published in 2022. And I have a subtitle, The Journey of the Human Soul to Discover a Life of Purpose. And actually the subtitles have sort of followed through. The awakening of the human spirit to the healing journey. When it first happens, this terrible thing happens, how do you figure out healing? Emerge was the opening of the human heart to the power of love. How Lisette and other characters really began to connect to that love can move them through all kinds of tragedy. And then finally, Thrive is the journey of the human soul to discover a life of purpose. So that's really what I'm going to use as a theme. So what I thought we would do real quick here, those of you who've done polls before, we're going to do a couple of polls. And I want to think a little bit about, this is a trilogy of books. That means it's 3 books. They follow in succession. So what do we know about book trilogies? You want to put the first poll? Do I have to stop sharing, Cindy?
No, I think you're good. So your favorite trilogy, is that the first one you want to use?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you haven't done this before, you just do a little, you can hit the poll on your screen, right?
It's launched now. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, we got a lot of Harry Potters. I know who put Little Women in there.
Yeah. While we're doing that, there was a question for Pam about the expense of having the recording in the studio, and who advised her on that?
Good question. You can start you need the microphone, obviously, and you need a computer. And I use a free software, Audacity. So you can get, I mean, you can buy a booth, but that's not necessary, like a whisper room. So it's very inexpensive to get started. You just need a good microphone that works for your voice. That's the main thing.
Cool. All right, so we've got Harry Potter is definitely heading the troop. Although my Best Revenge series, thank you so much for voting for me. It won't get you very far, but I will track down who didn't vote for me and find out. Little Women, I know my Aunt Celia and I share a great love for Little Women. We've actually traveled to see her house, Louise May Alcott's house in Massachusetts. And so there's some people who said, oh, okay, James Herriot series. Thank you, Sue. All Creatures Great and Small. That's a great one. So they're usually 3 books, but there's a difference between a book series and a trilogy. Obviously, a trilogy is 3 books. But what I found really interesting, I'm going to pull this down now and come back to my slides. What I find really interesting about this is that, for example, with Harry Potter, she actually produced more than 3 books. She actually went on to do 7 books, I think because it was so popular. And she actually did the first 3 books in succession within each a year apart. That's pretty amazing. The same thing with the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Those books continued. And then Little Women actually was 3 books, although Louisa May Alcott had wrote many other books at the time. I don't know whether I'll keep going after the 3rd. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to wait for my fan fiction to find out. Let's do the next poll. Cindy, number 2. And then we'll do 3.
Next one, books in a series.
Yep. So how many books are in a book series versus a trilogy of books? You gotta pick one. Oh, we've got a highly educated audience here. Kind of a trick question. Not all book series are trilogies, but all trilogies are probably book series. They're just limited to 3. So the most correct answer is as many books as the author wants. Diane Gabaldon, I think, is on book number 10 or 12 for her so-called series, starting with Outlander and moving through. She's also taken some of the characters, kind of minor characters in the major part of the books and launched their own series, which is kind of interesting. She's very prolific. All right, the last question. Last poll, Cindy. This is a little tougher, so you can do multiple choices. What do books in a book series or trilogy have in common? Do they have the same title, the same location for the story, the same time frame, the same book cover, the same storyline, the same characters, the same theme? Okay. Also very sophisticated readers here, I can tell. Dorothy, we have a great audience out there. Not really trick questions, but it's kind of interesting. This is the kind of thing I had to think about when I started doing this trilogy, like what is the most common thing between these? And that's when Diane Gabaldon taught me a lot about how to play in the field.
I think they're terrific questions. My goodness, because they really do make you think.
Right.
Plus, when you follow a trilogy or a series, it's so much more intriguing than just an isolated book.
Right.
But the series keeps you looking forward. There's something to look forward to. What's coming next? Just as with yours, what's coming next?
What's next? Yeah, I always feel like at the end of a book sometimes that I really love, it's like, oh, could I call that character up and continue the dialogue? It's like, oh, I don't want to leave them now. Lisa just mentioned in the chat the trilogy of Discovery of Witches, which is very popular. Also some of these books have moved into the movie theaters too, which is a whole other discussion about how movies, actually, the Harry Potter movies kept moving. All right, so here's what I wanted to talk to you about real quick, just get you thinking. And if you have any ideas, if you've been reading my books and you have any suggestions about where you'd like the characters to go, because that's, it's kind of like the reader gets to have a say here. So let's see. So my books, they don't have the same title. They do kind of have the same location for the story. I have not set them in a particular city. I decided I didn't want it to be Boston or Detroit. Then people were more like, I'd have to go and spend some time and figure it out. I set it in a capital city of a state in the United States. And that's really as far as the story, the location needed to be. But some trilogies do move. The same time frame, remember I said, actually, they're 10 years apart. Sometimes stories do stay in the same time frame, some not. And obviously not the same book cover, but you see with the help of my book marketer, Sharon, and also Anita, who's my book designer, we tried to keep the same kind of look to them. And I noticed that years ago when I was reading the Dragon books, very distinct cover. And you could tell the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. You could tell them from far away. They had yellow and they had black lettering. So thinking about that. But the other intriguing thing that, and I hadn't done this, so thank you for helping me to start thinking about writing this book, which I'm going to write over the holidays. So please, bear in mind that I'm not going to be available. I'll be in La La Land. So I started thinking about, how about the characters? Were they the same in each of the books? And I knew I played with them in the second book, but I really hadn't thought about it. So these are the main characters that I had in Awaken. And you can see in Emerge, Lisette stayed a major character. Lacey and Ari, not so much. They were mentioned in passing. Sophie, as Pam talked about, her voice, she's the college campus activist, who's also a best friend of Lacey's. Radiance has faded. The shaman has faded a bit. Ambrose is still one of my most crazy characters. And then his son and Wiley kind of shows up. Eric is a sometime boyfriend also of Lisette. And then I added, Marie, and you heard Marie in the prologue there of Awaken and Ralph. But I added these two characters in the second book. So the question is whether I'll add new characters, whether I'll bring these people back. And sometimes what I learned from Diane Gabaldon, a character that wasn't a point of view character, a character that was a minor character that you didn't hear the story from their point of view in the first book, may become a major point of view character in the second book. And that's kind of interesting to me. How does that work? So, and then as far as theme goes, or the same storyline and theme, I've tried to keep, as you could imagine, the questions that I was responding to, that the first book is about a college student being killed and inside the body of Lisette, how will she get out? That's the resolution of the first book. But the second book continues the story of Lisette, a victim of abuse and violence, and the healing journey to find strength, forgiveness, and connection, and particularly to find unconditional love that she's always wanted. And then the third book, I think, is going to have a similar change of themes, or at least the same storyline, but the theme is going to be emphasized. Another theme is going to be emphasized in this book. So that's what I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about today, because I've been thinking about this. So Thrive. So it's Awaken, Emerge, and Thrive, the journey of the human soul to discover a life of purpose. And for a lot of the women who've come through my workshops, that's one of the things, discovering a life. A thriver is a woman who's found a life of power and purpose, no matter what's happened to her. And so I wanted to do a little bit about thriving and also get a couple more voices in here. So those of you who know my work, this is what I teach. As Maggie could not. Maggie was hardly even identified as a victim. She didn't survive, and she didn't have a chance to thrive. So I help women to do that as Maggie could not. So the struggle, victimization, the transformation as a survivor, and then the happy ending. And so that's what I want the third book to be about, is how do some of these characters, perhaps all of them, end up now 20 years later really thriving. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor of what that's going to sound like in the book from some of the women who've come through my workshop. So I'm going to start with Adrian. And the question that we always have, Adrian, are you on?
Bear with me, I'm gonna get her to panelist.
Okay. So Adrian's been in my workshop for a number of years. She came, I think, through in 2012. Oh, great. Hi, Adrian.
Hi,
Great.
Here she is.
There she is.
there I am.
Okay, I picked out two pieces for her to read to you, and it's on the screen here. One is the question I asked her. She's in the third book of my nonfiction book, Living in the Thriver Zone. How was it when you first came into the workshop? Go ahead.
When I first met Susan, I was really good at surviving, but not much more than that. In fact, I was a high functioning survivor. It might have felt like I was moving forward, but actually I was vacillating between victim and survivor. I didn't even know what thriving was. I learned from Susan that what I learned from Susan was that to get to thriving, I had to pump in some positive energy into my life. Every step of Susan's 7 steps to thriving after abuse workshop have helped me to do that. The first step, see the journey, helped me see where I wanted to go and that I wanted to be a thriver.
Great. So the next thing I asked them in this book was, And then actually, Adrian had written this piece before the book was written, the nonfiction book was written. And I love when she reads this, so I want to have her read it to you. It's a piece she calls, I Know I'm a Thriver.
Should I give a little intro? I actually, Susan picked this topic and made it a little bit of a competition, and everybody write an essay. And I won. I really wanted to win that essay. How I know I'm a thriver was the original question.
Mhm.
I know I'm a thriver because I can look at myself in the mirror and see a happy face. My eyes are blue again, and there's happiness there where now where before there was only gray and sadness. Yep, that's right. My eyes have changed back to their God-given color, blue. They had been gray for years. I know I'm a thriver because I now feel joy when I wake up in the morning. Joy, joy, joy to be alive, joy to work, joy to see my children grow to be adults. I know I'm a thriver because I see color in the world again. The world is a rainbow. I know I'm a thriver because I'm able to help others see their beauty, and this brings even more joy. I know I'm a thriver because I can laugh again, not just any kind of laughter, rich belly laughter that oxygenates my brain and my soul, bringing even more joy. I know I'm a thriver because I am not afraid to dream again. I am the snake. I have shed the skin of fear of my dreams, and they come to me now and provide me messages of joy. I know I'm a thriver because I'm grateful for everything in my life, all of it, the good and the not so good. The challenges have helped me be more grateful for the abundance I now have. Thanks to you, Susan.
Oh, thank you, Adrian. What I love is when the women articulate this whole conversation. And so that's what I'm going to try to infuse in this third book, is what that for the characters, particularly for Lisette, the stripper who is now in her own business. But I think she has realized that the business isn't giving her the depth of purpose that she wants and the passion that she has. Yes, she's making good money, but it's also kind of kinky, I guess, still, particularly in the feminist world, like, why are you doing this? But the second thing I want to do is project, if they did come to a life of power and purpose, what would these characters look like? And I'll give you a little bit of preview of Emerge. I think I mentioned it when I showed the character. There's a woman governor in this book. And I wrote her many, many years ago, long before Michigan had a woman governor, which is she's one of my favorite people, hanging in there. And so I think that she's going to come up in the third book and talking about how she's going to be challenged to find a larger purpose to her life. So what I wanted to do is share one more piece, and I don't think that Mary Lynn can come in. I know she's here, but this is a woman who just came through my workshop from South Africa. And one of the things that I do in my workshop, one of the exercises I do is to have the women, one of the steps is to find a vision, to vision your life, and particularly beyond where you are. And they're asked to write a projection into the future, and they write it as if it's today. They're in the future as if it's today, and you have found your happy ending. And this is what my friend Jennifer is telling. She liked the woman governor and her husband in Emerge. Yeah, I love that, those two characters. Okay, let me go and share. And Cindy, I don't think we've been able to get connected to Mary Lynn, right?
No, she's on the phone, so she wouldn't be able to read.
All right. So if she wants to put something in the chat, here we go. So this is what she wrote. Remember, we're in the future as if it's the present. I'm sitting in my beautiful beach house overlooking the ocean. I'm working on my award-winning website. I have a few bestseller books on my bookshelf, and I am working on a new one. My inbox is full of letters of thanks and amazing accomplishments of women I have helped on their journey to living their best life. My two amazing sons and their significant partners are here with me. They are enjoying a wonderful feast. We are enjoying a wonderful feast, laughing and chatting. We are all so carefree and happy. We are flying high and loving every minute of our lives. I am very successful in my business and I have abundance of money. I'm currently building the 10th estate, which is a housing community in South Africa, that's what they call it, for moms and their children to live safely and happily. The estates provide affordable, beautiful homes in a secure estate with luxurious gardens, play areas for the children, and working centers for moms to create businesses to help them become financially free. Life is amazing. I have never been happier.
So Susan, there's a comment for Adrian that was beautiful on her writing and that there was emotional reaction. I'm also going to see if I can unmute Mary Lynn so she has the ability to talk.
Okay, Mary Lynn, go for it.
Let's see.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, you can. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Susan. It was a challenge enabling me to be able to join the workshop, but it was really life-changing. I know the proof is in the pudding. I still have to change my life. I'm in the very much beginning stages, but for the first time ever, I have hope, and I truly believe that with the workshop and with the follow-up workshops that Susan is going to arrange and that I will be able to have the opportunity to attend, that I actually have the opportunity to live my best life. And I look very forward to that. And I thank you immensely. And I must say, I'm so excited to read your books. I still have to get them, but I'm definitely, they sound amazing.
All right, we're gonna work on that for you. Thank you so much, Mary Lynn. And this is one of the opportunities I had in COVID time. And I never dreamed I would get somebody from another country. Although, you know, as my book marketer Sharon has said over and over, if you put something in the blog, they might actually read it. And that's what Mary Lynn did. She found a phrase in my blog that she was searching for. And so she found my workshops, and it's kind of magic, but it's very clear. All right.
It truly was. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. So, so I'm looking forward to starting my book. If anybody has any thoughts about it, or anything if you've read the other ones, any, you know, what ifs for the characters. So looking forward to that. That'll be next year. And I'd love to have people pick up the books and continue to read them. So I'm going to turn this over to Sharon, the book marketer, for the call to action.
Thank you very much, Susan, and to all of you who are out there today. It's such a joy to be able to bring so many people together from all over when we're Zooming. You know, COVID's been a terrible, horrible, awful thing, but there are some bright lights to it, and that is to bring everybody together today. This part, the marketing portion, is what excites me so much in working with Susan. I think this is either our 6th or 7th launch. We've been launching books and then the other products in ebooks and audiobooks on this very special October 17th and 18th. And it's really a day that we get to celebrate with Susan for what has been accomplished with the new products and all that Susan is doing. So part of that is why we're here today, is to celebrate with her. But also, it's an opportunity really for us to take some action steps. What can we do to further send Susan's message and Susan out into the world in all that she is trying to do to help women, to help the advocates for those women. And we really want to look to ways we can do that. Obvious way, and what you see on the screen, obviously you can purchase her books preferred from her website or on Amazon or all those other places. Wherever you find books, these have national and global distribution. But there are 4 other things that you can do depending upon the interest and what you may want to share and what you may want to do. You can go to Amazon or barnesandnoble.com and you can write a review. You do not have to have purchased the book, the print book, the ebook, or now the audio books from those locations, but you can go on and put a review. There's a place that says customer reviews. These are, I mean, we all know how reviews have kind of taken over. Every time you go to buy a product, especially online, you check the reviews. These are just so important to not only for other people seeing the book for sale, but there are lots of folks that will look to the reviews on these sites to look at, you know, maybe bringing Susan to their organization or librarians or bookstores that might want to consider bringing the book in. So, and it can be a few words, it can be a phrase, it can be a paragraph, it can be something in between. You can leave a first name and an initial. You can put your full name in, what you do for a living, whatever you want to do. There's real openness for that. And it might be on the Awaken and or the Emerge book, or it might be on the Thriver Zone series. You know, one doesn't transfer over to the other, but wherever you feel moved to do so, they are wonderfully helpful, and you can do them on both sites. Another thing that you can do is you've heard a lot. Many of you have read these books or will be reading them. You may have a connection with an organization, or you may know of an organization that maybe could really use this information directly from Susan and bringing Susan to speak, or maybe on a college campus. So many things are still being done by Zoom and could be in the future. Geography doesn't really create a problem these days. You may have a contact there, or you may just know of an organization that you think would be good to bring Susan. What I invite you to do is send Susan, you see her email at the bottom of the screen. Send Susan that information. You don't have to know anybody at that organization, but just feed those things in, and Susan and I will work with those names and contacts if you have them. Because if you think it might be good to bring her, that's probably very much the case, and we have ways to connect with people to do that. Same thing, if you listen to a podcast, we have Susan on something called the Podcast Guest Directory, which has led her to a number of podcasts, and we're reaching out to others. You listen to a podcast that you think would be great to have Susan on, just give us the name of the podcast. If you know the person who does the interviews, whatever additional information you may know, that's also great. The other thing is, if you know an advocate, Susan does a lot of speaking and presentations with the NOVA organization. But if you know a counselor or in some other way on a college campus, or an advocate for those that have been abused or experiencing sexual assault or whatever, we want to get the books into the hands of these folks too, because they can use them with the people that they work with. The other thing that is of particular interest also now, and especially with the audiobooks, as Susan said, audiobooks have really grown in popularity and are a bigger share of the marketplace, but also because of COVID, bookstores and libraries were shut down. But they still had budgets. So a lot of the budgets were being used for ebooks and audiobooks, especially from libraries, because you could still get those, even if you couldn't go to the library. And what's really happened is those that didn't know before about audiobooks, certainly that interest level in audiobooks has dramatically increased. So again, you know, something positive that's come out of the COVID situation, and there's a much stronger, and as somebody said earlier, sometimes they listen to an audiobook and then they might buy the print book or the ebook for themselves or sometimes for someone else. They hear it and they go, oh, you know, Susie or whatever may want the book. So those kinds of things, if you could go to your library, email your library, email somebody else's library, ask if they have it. When you generate interest, you might not need to check it out at that point, but just letting them know there's interest out there for the new audiobook. And we are in the process. Awaken is in ebook, and Emerge is in the process of becoming an ebook, and that should be available before the end of the year. So all of those are various ways that you can help. And it might not seem like a big thing to you, but just sending a name, sending an organization over to Susan, contacting your local library, all of those things together, we can really help Susan expand her visibility and make a difference.
Thank you, Sharon. She's a great marketer. I would add, getting a kind of a weird feedback, I would add that any of the presentation, I've been doing a lot of virtual presentations around the country, other countries, obviously. So please, if you know a group that's interested in having me talk, even we can certainly do something virtual. Okay, so thank you so much to everyone. I'm going to do 2 more things, and then we're going to, I do have an after party. I think that Cindy's been posting it in the chat. So Pam and I are going to be there. And if you have any questions that you want to, in a meeting, we can talk to each other as we talk in virtual less. But I want to draw some door prizes. I am checking to see, I think everybody that I drew, I was looking at the people who are here today. So here's, let me share my screen here because I can. So I'm going to give away 4 sets of audiobooks. So I have pulled from the names that are out there. Catherine E. And I'll contact you. You have one, either if you want a set of audiobooks or the print books of the 2 novels. Molly B. Is a winner, and June, who I think came the farthest in from Hawaii, and also Jody Rose, who I think is also on the. She may have left, but those 4 are the door prize winners. And I do have is one of the things I give you through ACX, which Pam described, is the opportunity to continue to give freebies out. As long as you get people to, I think 100 people have to buy your book, and then you get another 25. So please encourage that. That'd be great. I want to thank everybody who came today out there in the audience, and particularly Dorothy, who's always the most gracious and wonderful and smart and talented. And she tells me I'm a phenomenal person, and I think she is too. So thank you. And Pam, of course, we're going to keep working. Adrian and Mary Lynn, thank you so much for sharing your lives and your thriving. Sharon, as always, we are just like stuck together in this lifetime. It's not coming apart. And then Cindy, of course, thank you for all the backup and for all of you. So here's the chat, the new Zoom room number. I think Cindy, you've been posting it in this is for the after party. You've been posting it. You can go directly there. Give me about 3 or 4 minutes because I gotta shut this one down and open that one up. Last thing I want to say is I do have a free workshop coming up in November. If you go to myavengeanangel.com, if you know anybody who's interested, it will be virtual. They can be from anywhere in the country and the world. It's November the 6th and 13th. It's free. It's a 2-day workshop. It's supported by the nonprofit that I work with, CT Alive. Remember, this is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I think one of the things that really pulled me into the awareness issue this month and last month is the death of Gabby Petito, who really, her story resembled in so many ways my niece Maggie's story. The warning signs she missed, the people that didn't help her, the institutions that should have been there for her and she wasn't. So we need to continue this work. It's really, really important. So thank you all so very much. Please come if you have any additional questions, come and chat. And well, I can't give you snacks and drinks, but you can bring your own. And I will see you in a little bit. Okay.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks to all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I think we had fun. It was fun.
God bless and have a ball and the next one. Go.
Oh,
for it.
thank you, thank you. Bye-bye, Mary Lynn. It was good to hear you. Thank you, Lisa. All right.